My name is Natalie Cooper, and I've never been the kind of woman who asks for help. At 34, I was head nurse at Cleveland General's emergency department, one of the busiest trauma units in all of Ohio. I didn't get there by luck. I earned every sleepless night, every double shift, every ounce of respect I had in that hospital. People said I was calm under pressure, that I made chaos feel manageable. At work, I was the one holding the line. At home, though, I was just the one they leaned on until I broke. I lived in a small 2-bedroom apartment just outside the city. Nothing fancy, but every single thing inside it was mine. Bought with the money I scraped together working holidays, weekends, and over time. I didn't go on vacations. I didn't splurge. I saved. I had one goal: buy a little house with a porch and a patch of green, somewhere I could finally exhale. My savings were almost there, just sitting in the joint account I opened with my mom, back when I still believed in family first. But in my family, first always meant my little brother, Evan. He was the golden child. Always had been. Even when he dropped out of college. Even when he bounced from job to job. Even when he ended up in rehab twice. Somehow, none of it was ever his fault. He just needs more time, my mom would say. He's trying. Maybe, but I was the one footing the bill. When Evan's life blew up, and it did, often I was the first call. Bail money, rent, car trouble, it always circled back to me. Not because I offered, but because I was reliable. And in my family, reliable meant disposable. Still, I kept giving. I told myself it was love, responsibility, that maybe, someday, they'd say, "Thank you." But something inside me had started to splinter. And deep down, I knew it wouldn't stay quiet for long. It started small things most people wouldn't notice. Little delays, dodged questions, that queasy, low-burn sense that something wasn't quite right. I'd ask Mom how the account was doing, and she'd say, "Oh, it's fine. Don't worry so much." Nat, she always used that voice, soft, dismissive, the one that made me feel like a child asking for too much. I should have looked closer then. I should have trusted the knot in my gut. There were signs. A $300 withdrawal I didn't authorize. A dip in the balance Mom waved off as a bank error. Once, I even got a letter about an overdraft fee, something that should never happen with how careful I'd been. But every time I brought it up, I got gaslit. "You must have forgotten. You probably spent it and just didn't write it down. You're tired, Natalie. You work too much." But it wasn't just the money. Evan had started reappearing nervous, skinnier, darting his eyes like someone being followed. He'd show up uninvited, plop on my couch, talk a mile a minute about his next big break. Weed farms in Colorado, drop shipping, selling art NFTs, all nonsense. He was sweating even when it was cold out. His hands trembled. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. Then came the favors. "Just a quick ride. Just $50 till Friday. Just let me use your phone for a second." Every time. He got bolder. Once, I caught him outside my building, trying to get into my car. Said he thought he left something inside. Another time, I came home and the lock on my bedroom door looked off, scratched. I started sleeping with it locked, sometimes with a chair against it. Still, part of me didn't want to believe it. I chalked it up to stress. I told myself he was just struggling again, that maybe I was being unfair. Then I got the voicemail. A dealership thanking me for my $2. 000 down payment on a used truck under my name. They said it was paid in cash. By E. Cooper? And right then, all the pieces fell into place. My name, my money, my family. Something was terribly wrong, and I wasn't imagining it anymore. I didn't go home after work that night. I drove to the bank instead. It was just past closing, but I sat in the parking lot for nearly an hour, staring at the building like it might answer the question I'd been too afraid to ask out loud. How much had they taken? The next morning, I was there the minute the doors opened. I asked for a manager, handed over my ID, and requested a full printed history of the joint account I'd opened with my mother. I said I was doing a financial audit. What I was really doing was bracing for impact. And then the paper came. Page after page. Withdrawal after withdrawal. $420 here. $675 there. A $2.500 cashier's check marked as family emergency. Several charges listed as medical expenses I had no memory of. Some were labeled loan repayment to Evan. None of them had my signature. But all of them were real. By the end, it totaled over $19. 000. My entire down payment. Gone. When I confronted Mom, she didn't cry. She didn't plead. She didn't even look guilty. We needed it. she said with a sigh. Like I was being dramatic. Evan was in trouble. I stared at her. You emptied my savings. You're doing fine, she snapped. You have a job, a future. He doesn't. What were we supposed to do, let him go to jail? I asked about the truck. She waved her hand. He said you agreed to help. Isn't that what family does? I felt something inside me rupture, not violently, but completely. Not a scream, not a meltdown, just a silence so dense, so sharp, it could cut through bone. That night, I went home, pulled every document I had, bank statements, voicemails, screenshots of texts, even emails where Mom promised she was just holding the money. I scanned everything, uploaded it to the cloud, created backups on drives no one could access. I didn't have a plan yet, but I had evidence. I had clarity. And for the first time in a long time, I had myself. I didn't tell them I was backing up the evidence. I didn't tell them I was done playing along. Instead, I smiled the next time Mom called, said I understood, said I just needed a little time to process. I started asking gentle questions, nothing too direct. When exactly did Evan need that cashier's check? What was the medical expense for? I pretended to be concerned, not suspicious. And Mom, always too eager to defend herself, kept talking. I took notes. Every call, every message, every voicemail, they all went into a folder on my encrypted drive. Labeled Cooper Family Legal. I started to treat them like patients in critical condition. Monitor, document, prepare for escalation. The only difference was, this time I wasn't trying to save anyone. I went back through old paperwork, back to when I first opened the joint account. I found an email chain from 5 years ago where Mom wrote, I'll never touch the money without asking. I'd saved it by accident. Now, it was evidence. But what shattered the last piece of me was my credit report. Someone had applied for 2 credit cards in my name. One was denied, the other approved. It had a $1, $200 balance and growing. Gas stations, vape shops, a pawn store in East Cleveland, all places Evan had talked about. There was no more maybe, no more denial. This wasn't just betrayal. It was theft, identity fraud, financial abuse. It was a deliberate erasure of everything I'd built. And in that moment, a strange calm came over me. I stopped crying. I started calculating. I looked at Mom and Evan not as family, but as variables in a problem that needed solving. They didn't see it yet, but I wasn't the Natalie they thought they could manipulate anymore. They still saw me as the daughter who forgives, the sister who pays, the woman who stays silent. But they forgot. I worked in triage. I know what damage looks like, and I know how to isolate the source of the infection before it spreads. They'd started this quietly, cunningly. Now, I was going to finish it. 2 days later, I walked into a law office downtown, sat across from a woman named Angela Ramirez, and told her everything. Angela wasn't warm. She wasn't the kind of lawyer who made small talk or offered tissues. She was clinical, sharp, and efficient, exactly what I needed. She didn't flinch when I said identity theft or fraud. She didn't raise an eyebrow when I said the suspects were my own family. She just asked for details, and I gave her everything. Bank statements, screenshots, emails, my credit report, even the voicemail from the car dealership. I had labeled and color-coded every piece of evidence like I was prepping for surgery. Angela flipped through each one with a surgeon's detachment, only pausing to underline dates and circle inconsistencies. When she looked up, her voice was flat and clear. You have a case, a strong one. Something in me exhaled for the first time in weeks. Angela explained our options: civil litigation for the stolen funds, filing a police report for identity theft, potentially involving the IRS if the unauthorized credit card and cash transfers could be linked to income misrepresentation or unreported assets. She talked about subpoenas, recovery timelines, and financial restitution. It all felt big, too big, like I was about to knock over a house I had spent my whole life trying to hold up with both hands. But Angela looked me dead in the eye and said, "You're not destroying a family. You're protecting yourself from one that already broke." That night, I didn't sleep. Not because I was scared, because I was ready. The next morning, I placed a credit freeze with all 3 bureaus. I filed a fraud dispute for the unauthorized card. I emailed Angela to begin the paperwork for a subpoena to request footage from the bank on the date of the largest withdrawal. I wasn't rushing. I was moving methodically, silently. That weekend, I stopped by Mom's house under the guise of dropping off groceries. The moment I stepped in, I knew Evan was slouched on the couch, gaming controller in hand, brand new iPhone at his side. The place smelled like takeout and cologne. A $600 gaming console sat under the TV, the same console he once told me he couldn't afford. My mom offered me tea like nothing had ever happened. I stayed 20 minutes, just long enough to smile and say, "Hey, did you ever find out what that overdraft was about?" She paused. For a moment, the mask slipped, just enough to see the gears turning. Then she said, "It was just a hospital bill that accidentally got processed twice. No big deal." I nodded like I believed her. I even kissed her on the cheek when I left. But the moment I got in my car, I pulled out my phone and typed a single note. Lie confirmed. That night, I filed the first police report. I listed the forged credit application, the unauthorized bank withdrawals. I attached PDFs of every message and voicemail. I documented everything names. Dates? Even the fake reason Mom gave me that afternoon. A week later, a detective from the financial crimes unit called. He was calm, direct, professional. "We're opening an investigation," he said. "I just need the name of the person who opened the credit card in your name." My mouth was dry, but my voice was steady. "Evan Cooper," I said. "My brother." And I didn't flinch, not even a little. The silence didn't last long. 3 days after the detective called, my phone rang at 6:42 a.m. It was Mom. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, Evan texted me, "We need to talk." Then came another message, and another. By noon, I had 15 missed calls and 9 voicemails. Most from Mom, some from unknown numbers. One from Evan, slurred and panicked. "You're ruining everything, Nat." Everything. I didn't respond. I changed my voicemail to say I was unavailable due to work. Then I blocked their numbers temporarily. I needed space to breathe, to think. That night, someone buzzed my apartment at 11:37 p.m. I didn't answer. I watched from the peephole. It was Evan. He stood there in a hoodie, hands in his pockets, pacing. I could tell he was high, his movements were jittery, his posture tight. He muttered to himself, loud enough that I could hear the occasional curse through the door. After 5 minutes, he left. I didn't sleep after that. The next day, my supervisor at the hospital pulled me aside. "We received an anonymous complaint," she said gently. "Someone claimed you were under investigation for fraud." My heart stopped. She assured me that the hospital didn't believe it. My record was spotless, but they had to document the report. "I just wanted you to know," she said. "It's probably nothing." It wasn't nothing. It was a warning. They weren't just panicking, they were retaliating. Angela wasn't surprised. "It's classic intimidation," she said. "They're trying to rattle you. They want to make you look unstable or vengeful so you'll back off." Instead, I doubled down. We expedited the subpoena for the bank's security footage. Angela contacted the credit bureaus again, adding supplemental evidence. I updated the fraud reports with new activity. Then I filed a formal restraining order request against Evan. I also bought a motion-activated security camera and installed it outside my apartment door. I wasn't scared. I was preparing. 2 days later, I found a note shoved into my mailbox. No envelope, no name, just one sentence written in thick, messy black ink. "Blood doesn't turn its back on blood." I stared at it, standing there in the cold. My hands didn't shake. I didn't cry. I just folded the paper, photographed it, and slipped it into the same folder where I'd stored everything else. Evidence. If they thought guilt was going to work, they didn't know me anymore. But even as I moved forward, the pressure started to seep in. At work, I found myself glancing over my shoulder more often. I changed my route home. I slept with a white noise machine on, not because I liked it, but because I couldn't handle the silence anymore. Every unexpected knock made my heart jump. Still, I kept going. I had to, because I knew something they didn't. I was no longer doing this just to get my money back. I was doing this to take my life back. I had spent too many years being the one who held things together. The fixer, the buffer, the daughter who smiled and paid and stayed quiet. But now I'd peeled that role off like old skin. And if they thought I would run because they pushed harder, then they hadn't been paying attention. I work in trauma. I know what pressure does to people. It doesn't break me. It sharpens me. The deeper I dug, the darker it got. Angela advised me to pull my financial records for the last 5 years, not just from the joint account, but everything tied to my name. So I did. I requested bank statements, loan applications, credit reports, even my IRS transcripts. I wanted the full picture. No shadows left. And what I found didn't just disturb me, it terrified me. There was a loan application in my name from 2 years ago. Denied. But it used my full social security number and my previous home address. The lender was a payday loan office in Columbus. I've never lived in Columbus. I've never applied for that loan. I added it to the file. Then came the life insurance policy. It was a small one, something I'd set up when I was 24. I'd completely forgotten it existed. Originally, I'd listed my godmother as the beneficiary. When I checked the current records, I nearly dropped the phone. The beneficiary had been changed to Evan Cooper. That hit me like a punch to the ribs. It wasn't just a financial violation, it was personal, deeply personal. It made me feel watched, manipulated, unsafe in a way I couldn't fully explain. Angela didn't speak for a long time when I told her. Then she said, quietly but firmly, "Natalie, we need to consider the possibility that this wasn't just opportunistic. It may have been planned." That word planned lodged itself in my spine. This wasn't a sudden, desperate scramble. This was long game behavior. A pattern. A bleed so slow it almost seemed natural, like they'd been bleeding me dry drip by drip, while feeding me love in just the right doses to keep me from noticing. And God, I hadn't noticed. I started thinking back. Evan asking weird questions about how direct deposit works. Mom suggesting I leave my important documents at her place just in case of a fire. My credit card vanishing and reappearing in my glove box 2 days later. I had chalked it all up to stress. I thought I was just being forgetful. But I wasn't forgetful. I was being groomed. They had trained me through years of emotional leverage to doubt myself, to hand over control, to equate being a good daughter with being available for exploitation, all while making me believe it was my idea. Angela brought in a forensic accountant. Her name was Diane, and she worked fast, her voice sharp and efficient. After scanning my documents and timelines, she looked up and said bluntly, "This wasn't sloppy. This was structured. Not professional, but deliberate." She tapped a line on a spreadsheet. "This is a low-grade financial siphon. If you hadn't caught it," and they kept access. They could have wiped you out retirement, mortgage, everything. That cold, weightless feeling crept up my spine. They hadn't just stolen money. They had stolen time, trust, a future I was quietly building in the background while they laid their plans. And through all of it, I kept replaying that voicemail in my head. "Evan," slurring through his panic, "you're ruining everything." Now I understood what everything meant. It wasn't just about getting caught. It was about losing control. I wasn't the ATM anymore. I was the threat. And threats, in our family, got silenced. But this time, I was the one watching them. I used to think betrayal came in screaming matches and slammed doors. But no, sometimes, betrayal comes in soft voices, gentle smiles, and phrases like, "It's just for now," or "You're so good at handling things." Sometimes, it looks like love, until you look closer. Once I understood the depth of what they had done, planning my next move became less about revenge and more about reclamation. I didn't want to destroy them. I wanted to reclaim what was mine. My money, my name, my sanity. And I wanted to do it cleanly. No drama. No shouting matches. No teary confrontations. Just consequences. Just facts. Angela and I met again. This time in a quiet conference room with blinds drawn and coffee gone cold. "It's time to go on the offensive," she said, tapping a folder with my name on it. "We've built a case. Now we apply pressure. Step 1. File a civil claim." We named both my mother and Evan directly for financial fraud, unauthorized access to private accounts, identity theft, and breach of fiduciary trust. We included scanned documents, date-matched timelines, screenshots of text messages, and a certified record of the forged credit activity. Angela's tone was calm, clinical. But when she flipped through my organized binder of evidence, she smiled for the first time. "They underestimated you," she said. "That's good. Keep letting them." Step 2. Report to the IRS. It felt nuclear. Tattling to the government on your own mother felt grotesque. But then I remembered the insurance policy, the forged credit card, the payday loan in my name. That guilt, it vanished. I submitted the form with shaking fingers and a steadier heart. The forensic accountant and I worked through patterns of financial behavior, flagging cash withdrawals and matching them with Evan's known periods of unemployment. She found an odd spike of ATM activity the week after Evan had gone missing for 3 days, apparently on a bender. The money had come from my account. Next, we contacted the dealership about the used truck. They had security footage, grainy but usable. Angela drafted a formal request. If that footage showed Evan handing over cash while pretending to be me, it would crush any defense they could possibly muster. But the most sobering moment came when I tried to open a new checking account at a different credit union. The branch manager, a woman in her 60s with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes, listened carefully as I explained my situation. When I said the fraud came from my own family, she didn't flinch. "Honey," she said softly, "you'd be amazed how many people come in here with stories that start with, 'It was just supposed to be temporary.'" I wanted to cry, but instead I smiled and nodded. Because I wasn't a story. I was the ending they didn't see coming. I set up new accounts with multi-factor authentication. I created fraud alerts with all 3 credit bureaus. I installed security software on my laptop. I backed up all my evidence to 3 separate encrypted drives, one stored at work, one at home, one with Angela. I also changed every password I'd ever used, closed every old account. I notified my HR department to flag any inquiries made under my name. And quietly, with a lump in my throat, I removed my mother as my emergency contact. I replaced her name with my supervisor, Marcia, a woman who had once brought me soup during a night shift when I'd worked through a fever. That night, I sat on my couch with a folder in my lap, watching the city lights flicker through my window like tiny promises. I wasn't afraid anymore. I wasn't angry either. I was ready. Ready for the final move. Ready to strike not with vengeance, but with truth. Because they thought they were bleeding me quietly. But I had been documenting, and now it was my turn to cut deep. I chose a Wednesday, middle of the week, quiet enough to slip through unnoticed, but close enough to payday that I knew they'd feel it. Angela filed the civil suit at 9:02 a.m. sharp. By 10:15, a process server was standing on my mother's porch with a thick envelope and a neutral expression. Evan wasn't home, he never was in the mornings. But Mom was. She opened the door in her bathrobe, saw the man with the envelope, and apparently asked, "Is this a mistake?" It wasn't. At 11:03, the dealership released the surveillance footage. Grainy but damning. Evan, hoodie up, handing over a wad of cash, signing a form with my name on it in block letters, and walking out with a set of keys. Angela sent it to the detective. Less than an hour later, he called me. "We're moving forward with charges," he said. "This isn't just theft. This is structured fraud." I whispered, "Thank you," and hung up. Then I sat on my bed and cried. Not because I was sad, because for the first time in months, I didn't feel helpless. The next morning, an email from the IRS hit my inbox. A formal notice of investigation into Evan and my mother's joint finances. Apparently, the flagged activity on the credit card and the sudden influx of money into Mom's checking account had set off more alarms than we expected. Angela was already coordinating with a tax fraud specialist. And then came the final nail. The bank security footage arrived, blurry but unmistakable. A time-stamped video showing my mother at the teller window, withdrawing $2,500 in cash 2 days after she looked me in the eye and swore no one had touched the account. Angela filed the footage as supplemental evidence. Our civil suit was no longer solid. It was bulletproof. By Friday, Evan's phone number was disconnected. His Instagram disappeared. His name vanished from group chats. I heard from a coworker who knew someone in his old circle. Apparently he'd left town, headed east to get away from drama. Drama, in this case, being felony charges. My mom didn't call, not once. Not to explain, not to scream, not to ask me to drop anything. But she didn't go completely silent. Instead, I got a voicemail from my aunt. "You really blindsided your mother. Natalie," she said. "She's heartbroken. After all she's done for you." I listened to the whole thing. Then I deleted it. No reply. Because the only thing I'd blindsided them with was the truth. They had gambled that I would always be the quiet one, the helper, the peacekeeper, the daughter who swallowed pain like medicine and handed over money like it grew on trees. What they forgot was that I had limits. And once you push someone past those limits, they don't just break, they change. I didn't roar. I didn't raise a hand. I didn't threaten or scream. I documented. I filed. I followed every step, every law, every procedure. And now, the very silence they thought meant weakness had become the thing that destroyed them. The fallout came fast. 2 weeks after the suit was filed, Angela called to tell me that a hearing date had been set. It was sooner than expected, apparently. The court had flagged our case as time-sensitive due to the volume of evidence and the risk of ongoing fraud. It was happening. For real. That same afternoon, Evan was officially charged with identity theft, credit fraud, and unauthorized access to a financial account. I didn't find out from my family. I found out from the county court's public records page. His mugshot was there, eyes half-lidded, face pale and unshaven. No more filters, no more excuses. I stared at it for a long time. Not because I felt sorry for him, because it confirmed what I had avoided admitting for years. He was never going to save himself. Mom, meanwhile, lawyered up through her attorney. She tried to open a negotiation for a private settlement, no hearing, no court record, just quiet restitution. Angela relayed the offer and looked at me. "It's your call," she said. "Do you want this to stay quiet?" I didn't even pause. "No," I said. "Let it go public." We declined the deal. The hearing was set for a Friday morning. I showed up in a navy blue suit and black flats. Nothing flashy, just steady. The courtroom was bright, formal, but not packed. Angela sat to my right. Across the aisle, my mother was seated next to her lawyer. Back straight, jaw tight. She didn't look at me. Evan didn't attend. His lawyer claimed he was emotionally unfit to appear. Somehow, that felt fitting. When it was my turn to speak, I took the stand. I wasn't angry. I wasn't shaking. I was deliberate. I walked the court through the timeline, the transactions, the altered insurance policy, the forged application. I read out loud the note that had been stuffed into my mailbox. Blood doesn't turn its back on blood. I told them how many passwords I had to change, how I had slept with a chair against my door, how I had removed my own mother as my emergency contact. And when the judge asked how it felt to go through all of that, not just the money, but the betrayal, I didn't cry. I didn't falter. I simply said, "They didn't just steal my money. They tried to erase my sense of safety. My name, my future." Silence hung over the room like smoke. Angela rested a hand lightly on the table, solidarity without words. Then the judge leaned forward and said, "Miss Cooper, your composure and clarity have made this court's job much easier." "Thank you." The ruling came swiftly. Full restitution, court-ordered damages, a permanent fraud flag on Evan's financial record, and a written notice to the IRS regarding my mother's case. It was over. I glanced across the aisle. Mom still hadn't spoken a word, but for the first time since this entire thing began, she looked at me, and what I saw wasn't anger. It wasn't guilt. It was fear. And just beneath it, buried in a place she probably didn't even realize existed, was something else. Recognition. Not of the daughter she once manipulated, but of the woman who now had the power to bring her down and chose instead to walk away with her head high. It had been 3 weeks since the hearing when I got the letter. No phone call. No knock on the door. Just a plain white envelope. No return address? My name scrawled in handwriting I hadn't seen in months, familiar and shaky. Too gentle for the storm it had weathered. I stood there holding it for nearly 5 minutes. Not because I was afraid of what it said. Because I already knew. Inside was a single page. No greeting, no apology, no acknowledgement of the pain they caused. Just a single, centered request. "If you don't want the house." It read, "Maybe you'd consider signing over your claim. Evan wants to come back. We're trying to keep things together. He's getting help." I stared at it for a long time. The house. The same one they used my money to fix. The one I paid taxes on for nearly 3 years. The one they changed the locks on while I was at work. The one where Evan played video games on a brand new console while I picked up night shifts to make ends meet. Now they wanted me to sign over my claim, quietly, as if everything that happened could be erased with a favor. I laughed. Not bitterly, not even angrily, just in disbelief. They still thought I owed them something. I forwarded a copy of the letter to Angela, who reviewed it and replied with 3 words, "No legal obligation." I didn't have to respond. But I wrote a reply anyway. Just 1 line. "I no longer carry what you can't hold." I folded it, slipped it into an envelope, then I left it on my kitchen counter. I never sent it, because sometimes silence is the loudest answer. 2 days later, I got another message, this time from someone I hadn't heard from in years. Mrs. Danvers, my high school English teacher. She said she'd seen the name in a courthouse report her cousin forwarded her, and she wanted to reach out. "I'm proud of you," she wrote, "not just for fighting, but for not letting them define your worth." That message, I printed. I tucked it into the same folder with the court papers and the police report, not because I needed proof of anything, but because it reminded me, not all voices from the past are meant to hurt you. Some arrive simply to say you did the right thing, and you're not going back. A year later, I barely recognized my life. I moved out of Ohio, left the city, the courthouse, the echo of old voices, took a job at a hospital in Vermont, smaller, quieter, tucked between hills that blush gold in autumn. The ER still gets wild some nights, but the staff here thanks you after a 12-hour shift. They mean it. That alone feels revolutionary. My new apartment has hardwood floors that creak just enough to remind me it's real. There's a tiny balcony facing the mountains, and a kitchen that smells like rosemary and lemon when I cook. I planted basil in a little pot by the window. I talk to it when I water it. Maybe that's silly. Maybe that's healing. The nightmares stopped. Mostly. Every now and then, I still double-check the locks. I still hesitate before answering unknown numbers. Sometimes I wake up thinking I missed something that I forgot to protect myself. But the panic fades faster now. The shadows are softer. They no longer run the show. I joined a local book club. We drink too much wine and argue about characters like they're old friends. I signed up for a community pottery class and made a bowl that's lopsided and cracked in one corner. I use it anyway. It reminds me that imperfection can still hold things. And last month, I met someone, Claire, a paramedic with steady hands and a laugh that sneaks up on you like spring after a hard winter. I told her everything. Not the public version. Not the headlines or the court summary, the truth. My truth. I told her not because I needed her to rescue me, but because I wanted her to understand the fire I walked through and why I still check my smoke alarms twice. She didn't flinch. The lawsuit settlement paid for my move. It gave me breathing room and the freedom to build something without waiting for it to collapse. But that's not what saved me. It was the distance from guilt, from manipulation, from the unbearable weight of being the good one in a house that never gave me permission to be anything else. Now, I only carry what's mine. People still say blood is thicker than water. But healing is thicker than history. And peace, real peace, is when you can say, without flinching, that chapter is closed, and I'm not reopening it.